The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Do your job. That's an old Bill Belichick saying. He's been saying it for years. Maybe he's still saying it, but the Patriots aren't listening. They're 1-4, and they've been embarrassed in their last two games. So now, Ron Rivera has decided to adopt the Bill Belichick saying. You could make a case that it's outdated, that the Patriots are no longer listening to that. But what the heck? Team has lost 3 straight games. They were embarrassed last Thursday, a week ago tonight against Chicago, and they head as underdogs to Atlanta on Sunday. So why not? We'll hear why Rivera decided to post that sign yesterday, coming up shortly. Also, it's 31 years ago today that Art Monk became the NFL's all-time leading receiver with 920 catches. Rex Minturn is with me now. Do you know what the record is for number of catches? It's Jerry Rice who holds the record. I don't think.
Okay. I'm gonna say like 1,400.
More.
1,549.
Monk retired with 940. So on this night, 31 years ago, he became number 1. Today, he is number 20 with 940, and Rice 1,549. And if you subtract the two numbers, you come up with 609. Charlie Taylor, also a former Redskin, late Charlie Taylor, retired after the 1977 season with 649 catches. So the difference between, and it's amazing how great Jerry Rice was and how long he was great, 1,549, 940, the difference 609, Charlie Taylor 649, meaning you could just about add up the catches for Taylor and Monk, and they come up just 40 over the career number for Jerry Rice. Unbelievable, just unbelievable. We'll talk more about that coming up. Sam Howell said some things yesterday of interest. Also at 10:20, Gary Myers has a new book out called Once a Giant. It's about the 1986 Giants and what they did in winning the Super Bowl that year and the problems that many of them have had post-football. You may have read it. I think it was in the Post. There was an excerpt about Mark Bavaro, the great tight end on that team, and the problems that he's had post-football. Some have had it much worse, one even homeless, and we'll talk about that coming up. I also want to ask him, because he was the ghostwriter for, or maybe not even the ghostwriter, maybe the co-writer of this alleged book that Robert Griffin III was going to put out, blowing the lid off the sexual harassment in the Redskins organization when he played there. And people said, well, you know, you were pretty chummy with Dan Snyder at the time. What about you blowing the whistle at that time about what he was doing? No. It was about me and being sexually harassed. Huh? And then the book disappeared. So maybe Gary can shed some more light on that. Last night in Philadelphia, we had an ex-national put on a show. Bryce Harper had 2 home runs. Now, let me not be revisionist on this, and I still feel this way. They did the right thing in not giving him the new contract after the 2018 season. That was the right thing to do. They made him an offer just to show that they were willing to play ball, and it was $300 million, which was a lot of money, and Scott Boras turned his nose up at that and said, we can't do that, and he shopped them, and finally, kicking up the years, because I think the Nats were willing to go 10 years at $300 million. He got it up to $13 million and $330 to make it number 1 of all time at that time. That's, of course, since been surpassed by Mike Trout. But, if you want to say remorse, you want to be remorseful about Harper being in Philadelphia and being a big star there, I'm not going to agree with that. It worked out great for the Nats. Juan Soto took his place, did a fine job, and they got Patrick Corbin signed. They would not have signed Patrick Corbin, and he was key to them winning the World Series in 2019. But last night, Harper was spectacular. He hit 2 of the 6 home runs that the Phillies had in their 10-2 win over the Braves. And on top of that, there's Michael Jordan liked drama. Now, the famous story about Jordan and the Wizards before he became a Wizard was the Chicago Bulls were playing them in Chicago. It was a home and home. So you play one night in Chicago, and then 2 nights later you play in Washington. And LeBradford Smith, who at one time was a number 1 draft pick of the Wizards, a first-round pick, I think it was like number 12 overall, something like that. And he had a great game against Chicago. He had 38 points. Jordan said after that game that LeBradford Smith potched him on the tuchus and said, "Nice game, Mike," which didn't happen. But he invented this slight. And so Jordan decided when they played the game in Washington that he would score 38 on LeBradford in the first half. And he happened to miss a free throw. He had 37, but wound up with a big game and told this story for years, which wasn't true, that he got this slight from LeBradford Smith, and that's what motivated him. So the other night when Harper got picked off to end that game against the Braves, he was a little bit too aggressive on the base paths. The shortstop for the Braves, Orlando Arcia, was overheard celebrating in the clubhouse. Now, English is not his first language. He uses a translator. But after Harper had been picked off, and they were celebrating in the Braves clubhouse with the win, Arcia reportedly was heard yelling, "Ha ha, attaboy, Harper," several times. So last night, Harper, saying that he was motivated by that, blasted the Braves with 2 home runs and then talked about it after the game.
It's a super competitive game that we play, and, from both sides of the ball. And I enjoy commentary and things, and like I said, I listen to WIP, and you hear a lot of stuff on there as well at times, and I just enjoy it. It's a part of the reason why we play this game, and there's nothing like it. Everybody's competitive that we play against, and I just really enjoy those moments and the opportunity to play this game and have those moments.
So was there any motivation?
I mean, anytime anybody says something, right? I mean, that's what it's all about.
Did you enjoy staring them down?
Yeah, I mean, I stared right at him.
Yeah. Now, Arcia claims that he didn't notice that. He didn't see him being stared down. But according to Arcia, this little celebrating of what Harper did wasn't supposed to get out. He, again, through an interpreter, said last night about Harper, he wasn't supposed to hear it. That's why we were talking in the clubhouse. When you're in the clubhouse, I'm under the impression you can say whatever you wanted. I guess it was something that was reported. I don't know whether he said this when reporters were in there, but it got back to Harper. And look, I think baseball's a lot different than football or basketball. I think, you can be motivated by certain things, but baseball's about concentration, not hyping yourself up. And if you get too hyped, you're going to strike out. So I don't know, but it makes for fun conversation, and good for Bryce Harper for doing that. He loves Philadelphia. He said after the game, "I love this place, flat out love this place. There's nothing like coming into the bank and playing in front of these fans. Blue-collar mentality, tough fighting every single day. I get chills, man. I get so fired up, man. I love this place." He also listens to WIP, which has to endear him to the fans as well. That's one of the top sports stations in the country, so that's cool. Tom Lavero wrote about this in the Times today and wrote this column before last night, and the headline is, "Harper has been a perfect fit for Philly fans' city since bolting Nationals," and talks about how beloved he is in the clubhouse in Philadelphia, and then he's mixed it up with some Rockies fans in a game against Colorado. And a columnist there in Philly, John Stallness, wrote, "Has there ever been a more perfect fit of the city and player than Philadelphia and Bryce Harper? From his on-field production, intensity level, and personality, I'm hard-pressed to think of anyone who would rise above him in this category." Might say Charles Barkley, might argue that, but yeah, Harper has been that. And more from Tom in his column. He says, after they gave his former Washington teammate Trey Turner standing ovations while the shortstop was struggling in a slump, Harper went on WIP and said, "I have so much emotion toward it because I absolutely frickin' love it. I don't want to play anywhere else. I wish I started my career here, just the way it is and how lucky we are to do this." Now, Tom points this out, and I had heard this as well. He said there was little love for Harper in the Washington clubhouse. His teammates, tired of the hype that Harper did all he could do to stoke, When he got into the infamous dugout fight with reliever Jonathan Papelbon in 2015, most of the Nationals clubhouse sided with Papelbon. There were times when teammates expressed frustration to management about Harper's style and effort. And I'd heard that Jason Worth really took off on him at one point. But look, it's working out for him in Philadelphia. He turns 31 on Monday. He's happily married, got 2 kids, and it's all good. And everything worked out wonderfully for him last night, as tonight the Phillies can knock out the Braves. And if they do it, all 100-win teams will be gone, because Arizona completed the sweep of the Dodgers last night. All right, to the Commanders and the sign that was on the locker room in Ashburn yesterday, all capital letters, "Do your job." Ron Rivera asked about it.
Ron, we all noticed the "Do your job" sign going into that locker room. New piece of the locker room. What's the messaging there?
Do your job. That's simple.
Why did you put that? Why did you think that was important?
Because I think looking at the tapes, watching the games, our previous 5 games, looking at some of the stuff that I read, the numbers, there's obviously, to me, there's a sense and a feel that we're not doing the things we need to do. Okay, we're not doing enough of them. We got to do everything that's involved with your job, and that's kind of the emphasis.
As coaches, how do you help players do their job better?
Well, I think a lot of it is just about the way we practice, about the way we prepare, and then going out and playing.
Okay. Well, they play on Sunday, 2-point underdogs at Atlanta. How much this little layoff here is going to be helpful in correcting a lot of the problems? 29 sacks for Sam Howell. He's taken a beating. And Rivera, at this point, 5 games in, so we're, just about a little less than a third of the way through the season, asked for an assessment of what he's seen so far with Sam Howell, looking at some of the numbers he's put up through the 5 games.
Based on what we're looking at, we feel pretty good about Sam's development and growth. Obviously he's played some really, really good games, and he's had a couple of downers. It's unfortunate because there's a lot of categories where he is in the top 10. And 2 of them that are very unfortunate has been the turnovers and the sacks. And that's something we have to, as a unit, collectively reduce. And I think everybody is culpable in that situation, whether it be on the offensive side or coaching. I mean, we all have to take a share in that. But for his growth and development, a lot of things point in the right direction for us. I think the big thing for us now, and I said it a little earlier, is, we feel really good about the pieces. Now we just got to make sure we put the puzzle together and, make sure everything fits. And that's what we have to do. We've got to play better in some areas that, we've looked at and talked about.
That position is, you can't just bench him. There's a million things that happen when you bench the starting quarterback. So how do you, at the one hand, let him develop, but understand also that you have to try to win the game you're playing that day?
Right. And so far for us, we have felt that in a couple of games that got away from us, we felt keeping him out there is a good opportunity for him to learn and grow. And that was, done in conversation with Eric and how he felt about it. And, just thinking that every opportunity for him to get a snap is growth for us. And so that's kind of how we've looked at it. But to your point, there may be a time when it gets like that. But right now, it's about his growth and development. We want to win everything we do, every game we play, and that is obviously the goal.
When he says there may be a time when we get to that, that might mean if he regresses, if he's worse. And Rivera's got to look around the locker room and look at the faces of the players who've been there a long time and hope that this would be a season they make the playoffs, like leaders like Jonathan Allen, who's been here forever, Terry McLaurin, guys like that. And if Howell isn't getting it done, he's got a quarterback who's performed fairly well in the past in Jacoby Brissett. But what he's saying is we're not going to put him in now. I think the fear with Howell, this is my take on this, and these 2 blowouts that he was still in against Buffalo and against Chicago last week, is they don't want to put Jacoby Brissett on the field and have him look good. And then you got the fans saying, hey, come on, you want to win, let's put him out there. So it's a fine line that he's walking. This is all about the development of Sam Howell. I think he's made something of a bargain with the owners, not that they're definitely going to renew him, but that's all part of the process that he sold is we're going to develop Sam Howell. Now, as far as Howell's end of the bargain, he says, yes, I'm not going to last long if I keep playing like this.
The main thing is when I run the ball, I need to do a better job of just getting down and sliding and protecting myself. I think I've taken a lot of unnecessary hits, and that's just something that I just got to kind of change my mentality. Just because when I'm out on the field, I just want to win, but at the same time, I got to take care of myself and make sure I can protect my body and make sure I can, make it through the season. And then just as far as the sacks go, I just got to do a better job of just finding incompletions. And, when stuff isn't there, don't try to hold on to the ball or extend the play. Just try to find incompletion. And I feel like that's something that I'm continuing to work on each and every week. That's something that'll only get better.
Is it hard to go about changing a mentality? Because, that's something you've had for a long time.
Yeah, at times, especially, later in the game and, fourth quarter and stuff like that when the game is more on the line. But I think there's definitely a time and a place for my aggressive mentality as far as running the football. But I think for the most part, I just want to protect myself because, I'm not running anybody over in the NFL anyways, you know what I'm saying? So just try to do a better job, just try and protect myself and, just move on to the next play.
If it's about protecting him, then why did they do what they did at the end of the Chicago game? 51 straight pass plays, 55 for the game. And if, having him out there is important for his development, yeah, but having him out there as a target there where the defense knows you're throwing the ball and they're teeing off on him every time, I don't know about that. This is Sam Cosmi. We'll play something here from Cosmi and something from Logan Thomas, which I don't know if there's tension with what Bieniemy is doing, but it doesn't sound like they're giving him a stamp of approval on what they're doing with Sam Howell late in these games.
It sucks. It's not fun. I don't wish that on anyone, really. Like I said, 55 pass plays in a row, and then they're teeing off on you. That's just not. It's not a fun day to be an offensive lineman. I can tell you that.
That's the Cosmi view as an offensive lineman. Logan Thomas is a tight end. He would be on the receiving end of some of those passes, but he's looking at this. Also a former quarterback, so he's got some simpatico here with Howell, and this is what he said about the situation.
You can't ask him to drop back 55 times. Can't ask any quarterback to drop back 55 times in a game. So we got to do a good job of not going three and out to start the game, and get things rolling. And once we get rolling, as you saw in Philly, we're able to move the football.
Yeah, that's what they keep saying. We can move the football. We can move the football. Yes, they can, but they also, when they get behind, are not very effective with a quarterback who just doesn't have a lot of experience. Coming up in the next hour, Sam Howell talks about turning the page. We'll talk to Gary Myers about his new book about the 86 Giants called Once a Giant. And it was 31 years ago today that Art Monk became the number one receiver of all time. Things have changed. He's now number 20. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
Now.
And we're rolling for another couple of hours. Tony's out today. Coming up at 10:20, Gary Myers, longtime football writer in Dallas and with the New York Daily News, been retired for several years. He's got a book out called Once a Giant about the 1986 Giants. If you remember, that team played the then Redskins at the Meadowlands in January in a game to get to the Super Bowl, the NFC Championship game. And the Giants won 17-0. And to this day, there are people who swear that the back door, swirling winds, as they often had in January in the Meadowlands, somebody opened up the back door of the stadium when the Redskins had the ball and closed it when the Giants had it. I don't know about that, but it was a complete windstorm that day. And the MVP of that game was Sean Landeta, the punter, because he kept pinning him back. I don't know how he made those punts land where they did because the ball was just being blown all over the place. And the famous picture the day after that game was Jay Schrader on the front page of the Washington Post walking off the field with his blonde hair sticking straight up in the air after getting his butt kicked. And we'll remember that and other things about that Giant team that went on to beat Denver in the Super Bowl when Gary joins us at 10:20. Meantime, this team, the Commanders, they move on and try and get past what happened against Chicago last week. It's a big yakking day on Wednesday in Ashburn. That's the day where there's the most talking. Ron Rivera talks. Sam Howell talks. The locker room is open. Players talk. Tomorrow we get the coordinator, or today I guess it's the coordinators. It's Jack Del Rio and Eric Bieniemy, and then I guess Rivera has one more news conference on Friday before the game. But yesterday, a lot of interesting things to chew on that were said, and we'll start with Howell, who had his news conference before practice, and said what I guess anybody would say after what happened against Chicago. Time to turn the page.
We're past the Chicago game, and obviously it wasn't the performance we wanted to have, but, we're moving on. We still have 12 games to play, and we feel really good about our chances moving forward. And in this building, we know what we're capable of as a team, and what's behind it. What's behind us is behind us. And we're looking straight ahead, and we're looking forward to this game Sunday against Atlanta, against a good opponent, a really good defense. And so we got to have a good week of preparation, and we're excited.
I realize he might not play on Sunday, but what do you take from your time with Taylor Heinicke?
Yeah, Taylor's the best. Just being here with Taylor and just getting to learn from him. Obviously, kind of last year was crazy with how everything kind of went down. But, yeah, just seeing how he is as a person on a daily basis. And he's such a good teammate, such a good guy, and everybody loves him. And just seeing how he goes about his life and how he goes about his job and playing the position. Definitely learned so much from him. And he was just always someone that was so willing to help me learn. And so it was definitely a fun time, and he's a great dude. We still talk every now and then, so it'll be fun to see him before the game.
And Brian Robinson, what have you learned about him, just as a back, but also off the field, just in your time with him?
Yeah, B-Rob's awesome. He's a great dude, and he's a guy obviously I watched in college some when he was playing at Alabama. My running back coach at North Carolina, he went to Alabama for B-Rob's last year, so I kind of knew him a little bit through him. But yeah, B-Rob's been awesome. He works so hard, and he cares. He cares about his job, and he cares about his teammates. And it's so much fun to play with him just because you know how bad he wants to win. And I think we've all seen when he's going, it's hard to stop him. So we got to continue to get him involved and continue to try to get him going in the running game. And I think when we have all that stuff working, we're hard to stop.
Yeah, the question about Robinson was asked because they're throwing the ball way too much. I mean, they're number 2 in the NFL in passing percentage versus run. Number 1 is Minnesota. They're 1-4. Washington is number 2, 68%. That's too much. And the question is about, let's give the ball to Brian Robinson. I'll get his comment on that coming up. That's important. Part about Taylor Heinicke. I'm a fan of the Commanders. I've watched almost every game since 1966. Dan Snyder couldn't ruin it for me. I always felt like it was my team, not his team, and now it's not his team anymore. So I will be rooting for the Commanders. But Taylor Heinicke was a lot of fun. Rex, I would ask you, if he comes in the game, if, for whatever reason, there's an injury or the Falcons are struggling and they need a spark, will a little bit of you be rooting for him to do well?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be a weird, right? Kind of a weird dynamic.
I mean, I wouldn't be rooting for the Falcons by any means.
No, but yeah. I mean, he was fun while he was here, and it's an unbelievable story that the only reason he got here was because of COVID. He had called Scott Turner, the offensive coordinator, who he'd been with before in Carolina and Minnesota. And he said, looks like my NFL career is over. You got any coaching jobs? And Turner said, sit tight because we got crazy stuff happening with COVID. And they brought him in to be the COVID quarterback, meaning he could not be in the quarterback room. He had to be somewhere else remotely just in case COVID ran through the 3 quarterbacks that they had. And eventually, because of injury and because of Dwayne Haskins not playing well, he got his opportunity. And from sitting on his sister's couch in September, he's starting against Tom Brady and the eventual Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a playoff game and almost beating them. So, that was fun, and I'll have some mixed emotions if he gets into the game on Sunday. This is more from Howell, and yes, the record is 2-3. Yes, they were clobbered twice in games, once against Buffalo and once against Chicago, both of them at home, but says this about optimism.
Our record is what it is, but I think we've shown that we can move the ball on anybody, and I think that's our mentality on offense, and we know what we're capable of. And I feel like me personally, I've I played some good ball at times, and I think just continuing to build on what I've done good and learn from what I haven't done as good. And I think there's been times where I've been really decisive. The ball's coming out fast, and when that's happening, our offense is pretty good. And so just trying to continue to work on that and continue to try and do that each and every week. Obviously, it's harder versus some defenses than others. But yeah, just continuing to, build on the things that have worked for us so far. And I feel like we've moved the ball on everybody. It's just a matter of, not shooting ourselves in the foot and not having sacks, not having penalties, just things that slow us down. So yeah, we're definitely capable, of putting a lot of points up every single week. It's just a matter of us doing the right things and focusing on the details each and every week. Now, this is a team, personnel-wise, that was built to run the ball. As recently as last year, it was insane to say this, but you had, it may have been Ron Rivera who said we want to be 2-1 run to pass, which is insane in this era of football. But they're way too pass happy, and this is kind of a diplomatic response from Brian Robinson, who's been terrific when they've given him the ball. The problem is they fall behind all the time and they can't give him the ball. But he would like to see them give him, I would think, 20 carries a game. Here's Robinson.
I feel like we've been missing the running game. I would love to get the running game back on track, but if you think about it, we haven't just had a great opportunity really to get the running game going based off of holes that we dug ourselves into. So I would love to get the running game going, but we just got to keep stacking days for it.
Now, next issue is this. Emmanuel Forbes was their first-round draft pick. He had been starting. He's been benched after getting torched in back-to-back games. And now he's on the bench along with everybody else in their draft class, getting basically no contribution from the players they've drafted. Some on special teams, but they're not playing. Guys who were taken after Forbes in the first round, they're on the bench. And Rivera was asked about that yesterday, and his explanation for all these draft picks, and this is on him because he's got final say. This is just like Bill Belichick. This is a coach-centric operation, as Dan Snyder made it when he hired Rivera in 2020. And all these players that he drafted aren't playing. Here's his justification for that.
Looking at any group after a year is way too early to draw a conclusion. I really do mean that. I mean, it's funny how, and again, I said this, a previous press conference, that, back in my day, there was no rush and hurry to force guys out on the field. There was this growth and development period where, guys took a little bit of time. I mean, and some people still do that. Some people still think that way before they throw guys to the wolves. And sometimes you feel that's what happens when you got to put young guys on the field. But, to me, it's kind of rash if you look at it that way and start judging it based off of limited opportunities or time.
Yes, Ron. If this was 1985 or 86 or, even into the early 90s, you would be right. The problem now is the salary cap. And the salary cap forces you to play young players on rookie deals. And you need to shuffle out veterans before they get to the second deal, unless they're, great players like Terry McLaurin or Jonathan Allen. So, yeah, in the old days, no salary cap. You could afford to do that. You could afford to stash guys on injured reserve, as Joe Gibbs was really good at doing with these phony baloney injuries, including like rare blood diseases for Stan Humphries and, things like that. And with any player, you probably had some previous knee injury, so you can find something under a scope and put them there. You can't do that anymore. You have to play these guys. And these players that you drafted were drafted for backup, and maybe they'll eventually get on the field because of injuries. They got to play. If you're taking a guy in the second round, he needs to be on the field for you by the fifth game. That old school thing of, we can afford to wait. Sure, they used to draft quarterbacks and have them sit for 4 or 5 years. Well, only the Packers have done that in the last 30 years. And the jury's still out on Jordan Love, whether that's going to work out. But, you can't do that anymore. And the salary cap just doesn't allow it. So I'm not buying that explanation. As for Forbes, who started the season, and he was brought here because they don't turn the ball over very much, and Forbes holds the record for most pick sixes in NCAA history with 6 of them. He's ball hawk, but he's been just lit up in the last 2 weeks by, one of them is a Pro Bowl receiver, and one of them is a really good receiver, and he's just looked terrible. So as Rivera said this past week, we can't do what we're doing with him anymore. So he's going to be on the bench. This is Rivera on turning the page on Forbes and what he's seen from him so far as he attempts to get him back on the field.
We'll see. I mean, how he handles this situation and circumstances is important for him. It's important for us to see and see how he handles a lot of things. So we'll continue to work. He'll work. As will the rest of the DBs, and we'll see how things go.
How did he look in practice today, I guess?
He looked good. There were some things obviously that you could see he was really focusing on. You could see the work during the individual drills. A couple of things that he did off to the side with one of the coaches, and then on the actual practice field when he got his opportunities, there were some things that you could see he was focusing on.
I'll say this, and not every rookie would do this in this position. He's been benched, and he's looked terrible on TV the last 2 weeks. Someone would hide from the media. I'll give him credit for this. He did talk to reporters about what he's going through and the advice that he's been receiving. This is Forbes.
No, just stay confident. Just be myself. Don't try to be nobody else. Just go out there and do my job and play fast.
I think Darius Slay put out a tweet, other players maybe reaching out to you. What does that mean to you to kind of see that? And again, everybody's been a rookie at one time.
It's just guys that have been in my position, knowing probably what I'm going through right now and how my mind is, what I'm thinking. So they just keep giving advice, great advice, and it's helping me get better each day.
In particular, these last couple of days, what have you been doing? Watching tape, working on certain things?
Oh, yeah, just honestly just working on my craft and just focusing in on the small details in the game.
Okay, good for him. Good for him for being stand-up and talking to reporters, and we'll see if he gets back on the field. This is Kendall Fuller, and he's the veteran. He's played on a Super Bowl winner in Kansas City, and asked about this defense and the secondary and turning things around.
You just keep on playing, man. There's no added pressure. It's the NFL. I think for media, for fans, it's a week by week thing. But for us, you got to stay steady. You got to keep on, just putting your head down and keep on working and trusting that the results are going to show up. I've had many times rough stretches, rough starts to a season and things like that. And you just keep your head down and you keep working. That's life. You're never going to go through an NFL season. Everything's going to be pretty. You're going to hit some adversity. That's football. That's life in general. So you just keep your head down. You keep on working, and we're just going to stay together, work together, and we're going to fight our way out of it.
To that point, the rookie there at Emmanuel, how have you kind of helped him maybe through this process? Tough couple of games for him, but you mentioned you were a rookie once. You've been through those stretches. How can you help a young guy like that?
I mean, he knows that he's been playing DB, He did what he did in college, first-round pick for a reason. That's life as a DB. You're not going to, no matter how hard you work, no matter what you do, how much you prepare, you play in this game long enough, you're going to have stretches like that. You're going to have times where you get beat. And you just got to keep your head up, keep on working, keep on trusting your abilities, your techniques and things like that. And, he'll go back out there and make plays because of how talented he is, how hard he works. So we just keep on reminding him of that, man. That's life as a DB. You're going to face adversity. It's going to be tough times. It's going to be good times. And no matter what you do, you can't shake that.
We'll see what happens. It's a long season. Maybe he gets back on the field. Maybe he redeems himself, or maybe he's on his way out of the league. We just don't know. One more thing before we get to Gary Myers and in his new book, Once a Giant. And I'll say this, as Tony often says, I think I had that, although this wasn't easy to call. Kansas basketball facing 5 major violations. NCAA looked at it and said, you're good. You're okay. They were ordered to take down the 2018 Final Four banner. Whoop-de-dang-do on that. But there was no postseason ban. They lost a few scholarships. 5 level 1 violations. And I remember when this investigation was revealed in 2017, I thought, oh, man, they've blown the lid off college basketball. This is for NIL, and now that cheating is legal, it seems like ancient history. But at the time, you weren't even able to give, as was pointed out, you could give a player a bagel, but you couldn't give him cream cheese because it was an extra benefit. And this, was all about Adidas representatives funneling money to players and all that stuff. And they said, no, we're eager to move forward, as they always are, without this cloud hovering over our program. Yeah. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And now it's just above board, but it's been going on forever. And Kansas won a national championship and all that stuff. But it's okay. They've learned their lesson. Everything's fine now. Yeah, you can't put up that banner. You lose a few scholarships, but Bill Self keeps his job. Right? Still, he keeps on ticking. He in the interim, while this was going on, he got a lifetime contract. So it is what it is. What do you say? It is what it is. Coming up, Gary Myers, the new book, Once a Giant, 86 Giants. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Gary Myers has been one of the premier pro football writers over the years, working for the Dallas Morning News, the New York Daily News, also for HBO. And he's got a new book out about the 1986 Giants called Once a Giant. Now, I need to get my timeline right because we kind of followed each other around the NFC East in the 80s. I know we were both in Dallas in the early 80s. Were you back in New York in time to cover those 86 Giants?
Actually, I covered a lot of their games for the Dallas Morning News that year, Andy, because 85 was the last year I was a Cowboys beat writer.
Mm-hmm.
And in 86, I became the NFL columnist for the Morning News. And if you remember, Washington and the Giants had one of the great division races of all time coming down to like the 14th week. So I covered a lot of Giant games and a lot of Washington games that year. And so I was around the Giants a lot that year. And, many of the players that played on that team were there in 1981, which was the last training camp of the Giants I covered before I moved to Dallas. And then when I came back to New York in 89, the foundation of that team was still intact from 86. And I've stayed in touch with so many of those players over the last, 3 decades that I felt like I was around every day in 86 for as much as that I was.
Yeah. I mean, I actually beat you to New York by about a year, I guess. So I covered those 88 Giants for WFAN, so I got to know a couple of them as well. And by that time, they were starting to fade a little bit. And though they won another championship in 1990, I think you would agree that of the two Bill Parcells Super Bowl teams, this was the better one?
Oh, yeah, the 86 team was probably the best team in Giants history.
Yeah.
Certainly the best team of the Super Bowl era that the Giants have had, and they've won 4 championships. I mean, when you think about the roster on that team, with, Taylor and Sims and Carson and Banks and Bavaro, Jim Burt, I mean, all those guys were great players. And then the coaching staff, other than Lombardi and Landry, has any team ever had a coaching staff with 2 coaches, I'm talking about, better than Parcells and Belichick? Or at the time, we didn't know it necessarily about Belichick. Then we knew he was a defensive coordinator. We had no idea he was going to go on to be the greatest head coach in NFL history. But when you think about, Parcells and Belichick on the same staff, I mean, that's an awful lot of brain power.
Yeah, no question. And until about 2 weeks ago, some of us were saying, well, maybe Parcells won because of Belichick, and maybe he did, but that's another story for another time. But let's talk about. I do want to talk about a big part of the book, which is what became of those guys, but on that 86 team and what followed them, and not all good things. I read the Bavaro excerpt, which I think it was in the Post a few weeks ago. But this team, as I remember, this was following the 85 Bears, and I think a lot of people thought that there was going to be a matchup of the two teams in the NFC Championship game, as the Bears had the devastating defense the year before. Giants are mainly a defensive and a running team, although Phil Simms was very good in 86. And it didn't happen because Washington beat Chicago at Chicago. So they go to New York, and the games had been relatively close, though the Giants had won by 10 points at Washington. And man, this was just a complete shellacking, a 17-0 shutout. And to this day, Gary, as you know, people here in Washington say, oh, well, they opened the back door of the Meadowlands when the Redskins had the ball, and that's when the winds were swirling. But that was a game where somehow the Giants absolutely overcame the elements to win that game.
Yeah, they didn't need to open the back door for that game because it was windy all by itself. The Giants were accused of doing that. It was behind one of the end zones opposite from where the players head off to the locker room. There was a gate there that they were able to manipulate to their advantage, but that was such a windy day. The Giants was actually Lawrence Taylor, who, and I wrote this in the book, he considers punchers and kickers maybe one step above drug collectors, the NFL drug collectors on the food chain in the NFL. He credited Sean Landeta for winning that game.
Yeah.
Because he was just amazing with his punts. I mean, he, with the wind, against the wind, he just gave the Giants a lot of what Parcells always called that hidden yardage. And, Parcells decided to take the wind and kick off in that game. And it was just, the conditions were just miserable, and the Giants were used to playing in it. And I think they just had a really big advantage. And it kind of dispelled the theory that you couldn't beat a team 3 times in one season, which I never subscribe to anyhow. The better team usually wins. And each game is just independent, so what happened in the previous 2 really didn't make a difference. But I think the Giants were just a better team than Washington that year.
Yep.
And then Washington, I keep saying Washington. Should I say, I guess I should just call them the Commanders.
Well, you know what?
Redskins in those days?
Here's the thing. I mean, as you probably know, the new owners got themselves in a little bit of hot water because they were talking about their Redskin memories, and that led people to say, good, they're going to change the name back. And finally, they had to come out and say, no, we're not going to do that. So I say Commanders sometimes when I'm talking about the team that played as the Redskins. I call them the Redskins, so I think it's fine. Okay.
Okay, all right, because I'm always catching myself now when I'm doing different shows.
It's okay.
I think the Giants were a better team than the Redskins that year. And the game that, meant everything was that game at RFK.
Yep.
I believe it was the 14th game of the season that they went in tied, I believe, and then the Giants won the game, so they had the tiebreaker, then they finished it off. But, the Redskins came back and won it the next year. Because they handled the strike much better than the Giants did, and just in terms of putting together a replacement team. But those were great days in the NFC East. But Andy, I just want to point out, like, my book, and because people said, why are you writing about this team now? Well, it's not a recounting of the '86 season by any means, because plenty of those books were done, in '87 and '88. What I decided to do, because I'm so intrigued about this issue of life after football. We've heard a lot about CTE the last 10 years, but the problems these players from the 80s and 90s are having today, that they're in their 50s and 60s, goes way deeper than CTE, although that obviously is a major problem. So I wanted to go back, and I wanted to do a book about life after football, and I was trying to think of how to do it. Should I try to find a really recognizable name from every team from 1986 and put the book together that way. And I figured that would just kind of be disjointed. I needed to tell a story. So I decided to write about this team because I knew so many of the players. I'd never done a book about New York's team, and this is my 6th book. And I just figured the combination really worked because these players were just in the right age demographic that I wanted to write about. And I had known sort of peripherally some of the issues that they were having. And I'll tell you this, I was really, and you mentioned the Bolaro excerpt, I was really just blown away by the stories these players, told me about, 4 of them contemplating taking their own lives because of issues that, probably were a result of playing football, and, hip replacements, knee replacements, shoulder replacements, mental health issues. So the way I told the story, Andy, was that I I illustrated how this team really became a brotherhood by winning a championship together. And what makes it really unique is that 37 years later, that bond is still really strong.
Right.
And these players stay in touch. And anybody who's in trouble, either financially or physically, they rally around them and they help each other. And I think that's the heartwarming part of the story that goes with the heartbreaking part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the headlines that have come out about the book, Parcells supposedly has lent out, $2 million to various players who are in trouble. $4 million, okay. And I remember these guys were still on the team. Well, I guess Harry had retired at that point, but Harry Carson and George Martin were longtime guys on that 86 team. They had gone through the tough years, the 3-win seasons before. So Parcells really relied on them as leaders, as you know, and they were seen as, the people that everybody looked up to on the team. Both of them, right, Gary? They had post-football problems.
Well, Harry specifically. George has done fine.
I thought he was
Harry
bankrupt. Okay, I thought he had financial problems, but maybe not. Okay.
But George Martin?
Yeah.
No, George actually was a very successful business guy.
Okay.
And at one point hired Curtis McGriff, one of his teammates who was having financial problems, and he hired him at his company. But Harry had problems with post-concussion syndrome. And the thing that's really great about Harry, and he's different than any player I've ever come across in more than 40 years of covering the league. They used to call him Parcells' guys. That was Harry and George Martin and Lawrence and Phil. But Harry also considered them his guys. And he's one of those players that really has gone out of his way to stay in touch with his former teammates to make sure if there's any problems that they all get together and figure out a way to help. He's always checking up on them to see how they're doing health-wise. And for those who don't remember, when Harry got into the Hall of Fame in 2006, his whole speech was devoted, and he ad-libbed the whole speech. The whole speech was devoted to imploring NFL executives and the NFLPA to taking care of the former players. Don't forget the players who made the game what it is today. And what it was in 2006 isn't anything like it is now in 2023 in terms of the money it's bringing in. But so Harry's entire Hall of Fame acceptance speech was just strictly about his fellow former players. And I really think that got the ball rolling with the Players Association and the league to improving the benefits for the former players and, with the pension and health insurance. Can you believe it? At that point, these players only got health insurance for a year and a half after their careers were over.
Wow. Yeah.
And now it's 5 years, which is still completely insufficient when you consider that most of these guys don't really have problems until they're in their 50s and 60s. So, if the average guy retires at the age of 30 or 32 and he gets 5 years of health insurance now, does that really benefit him down the road? But Harry at least, really brought this subject to the forefront, and I think he was really instrumental in the change that's happened in the last 17 years or so.
He said, I believe, "I wish I never played football." I think that was a quote that he had later on. I think so.
Yeah, he said that if he knew now, if he knew then what I always screw that one up. If he knew then what he knows now,
right? He wouldn't have played. Yeah, and he had a long, great career, Hall of Fame. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he really suffered. I mean, Andy, about 5-6 years into his career. Now, for people not familiar with the geography around here, Harry lived in Westchester. Most of the players lived in New Jersey, but Harry lived in Westchester for part of his career. And to get from Westchester to Giants Stadium, where the Giants practiced, you had to go over the Tappan Zee Bridge. I mean, you have to go over the Tappan Zee Bridge. And early in his career, this was like 79 or 1980, and he came into the league in 3 or 4 years earlier. He was just incredibly depressed and didn't know why. And he said to a date that he drove across the bridge thinking, I'm going to take a sharp right turn and barrel through the fence and wind up in the Hudson River.
Wow.
That he was going to do that to himself. And it wasn't until after his career was over and started learning about the impact concussions had on him that he really believes that back early in his career because he had already suffered a lot of concussions, that was the cause of his problems. But because, back then it wasn't the information or the research that was done on concussions and the education that's going on now, he had no answer to why he was feeling that way. And now he's pretty much convinced that that was his issue, back then. And, fortunately for Harry, he got the proper care after his career was over, and he's doing great today, and he's trying to help as many, players as he can. He tells an amazing story, Andy, in 1984, in a game against the Redskins at RFK, that he and Riggins had a head-on collision. It was like two freight trains coming right at each other, and Harry was completely out on his feet. His teammates had to help him back to the huddle. He couldn't understand the signals that Belichick was sending in for the defense, so he tapped his helmet, which was a sign like, give it to me again. And he still had no idea. Gary Reasons, who was a rookie, was a really smart player, and he was watching. He knew Harry was having problems, so Gary interpreted Belichick's signals, and then he called the plays in the huddle. He called the play in the huddle for the next play, and then by the time the cobwebs came out of Harry in the next couple of plays, he was okay. But, if that happened today, he probably wouldn't play for the next 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah. And then nowadays, you're encouraged to leave the game, or they're supposed to have independent people look at you. But
right.
that was a prehistoric time compared to now. We're talking to Gary Myers, who has written a book about the 1986 Giants, Once a Giant, and it's more. It's about that season, but it's about what became of those players. Is there one you've talked about? Harry turning things around, and I guess George Martin, I was incorrect about, has done well. Is there anybody who's really in desperate straits right now from the effects of that season or that team?
Well, yeah. Harry Carson started a GoFundMe page for Brad Benson, who Redskin fans will remember had those incredible battles with Dexter Manley.
Yep.
In 1986. I interviewed Brad about 6 years ago when I was still at the Daily News for a story on the 30-year anniversary of the 86 team. And physically, he was really, really struggling. He had multiple surgeries after his career. And, since that time, players have told me he's had really bad financial problems. But he was not available to me to interview again for the book. I reached out to him every way possible. And even his teammates have told me that they've had a hard time getting a hold of him. So I'm not really sure, but I do know that he's had financial problems. Bobby Johnson was another one, not a really well-known player, had a huge catch for the Giants on a 4th and 17 play in Minnesota earlier that season, but also had a major cocaine problem, and the Super Bowl was the last game he played in his career. And 3 years later, he had no money. He was living part-time on a park bench in Nashville on the site that is now the Titans Stadium.
Wow.
And apparently at night, that became a pretty tough area to be in. A lot of drug dealers and people of that type. And Bobby, if you can imagine this, by 1989, Bobby sold the Super Bowl ring. He pawned his Super Bowl ring in Nashville for $450. He kept the amount intentionally low because he wanted to be able to buy it back. But he used that money for drugs, for food, and to stay in a $29 a night hotel. And by the time his option was up on being able to buy the ring back, he had no money. So the ring was gone. Long story short, it winds up at a memorabilia show at one of the Super Bowls that was in Atlanta. A Giants collector bought it for $10,000. Bobby got his life straightened out. There was a story on ESPN in 2016 about what happened with the ring. I had actually written about it about 10 years earlier, but when it got on ESPN, it really went viral. Parcells heard about it, and with a friend of his, they tracked the ring down and bought it back for $30,000 and presented it to Bobby Johnson. But This was only after Parcells had done his research and found out that Bobby hadn't done drugs in about 15 years, had a job, had a steady relationship, and really had straightened his life out. It wasn't until he was convinced that he wouldn't give him the ring and then Bobby would turn around and sell it to buy drugs that he went ahead and tracked it down, and they paid a lot of money for it. And Bobby was very, very emotional when the ring was presented to him. It's a combination heartbreaking and heartwarming stories in the book. You know, terrible story that has turned out okay.
Yeah, we had a similar thing with Dexter here. That's that's a horrible thing that turns out well. One quick thing before I let you go, and again, the book is Once a Giant. This is somewhat local here. Robert Griffin III claimed a year or so ago that he was going to blow the lid off the Commanders organization and Dan Snyder and sexual harassment. And then it was like, well, you were friends with Dan Snyder. You know, why didn't you say something at the time? And then, oh, no, I was sexually harassed. And then the book went away. And supposedly you were the co-writer of that. How far did that get, and why did it not get off the ground?
Well, I have to be really careful how I answer this question.
Okay.
Because I have some obligations that I agreed to in order to, well, let's just say, the book was written. It was done. It was 80,000 words written.
Wow.
I ghost wrote it for Robert. The book was completely in his words. And all I can really tell you, and I wish I can tell you more, Andy, is that Robert changed his mind.
Okay.
And he thought it wasn't in his best interest to have the book published, and he just changed his mind. You know, he was off to a great career at ESPN, and you know, I wish him well and all the luck. I was disappointed with his decision. There was nothing I can do about it. I thought we had put together a really good book. I will say this. I don't think that he blew the lid off of what happened there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it like that.
Okay.
And the stuff about him being sexually harassed, we hadn't gotten around to adding that part to the book.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
But you know, he had told me about it, and you know, we were in the process of figuring out what to do with that because it was such a sensitive topic. I was kind of working on his timetable, and before we can get together to include that, he just decided it wasn't the best timing for him. And I know he took a lot of criticism when he started teasing the book on Twitter and stuff, and people were saying, you know, why didn't you say when you were there? And I don't really have the answer to that. I would have liked for the book to come out because I actually think that it was a really good book, and there was some really meaningful things in there that he did discuss that I would have liked for people to have read.
Okay. Yeah, I would have been very interested to read it too, but it didn't happen. And I think he made the right decision for him, but not for us who might be interested in what, you know, he had to say. So I'll take that.
Yeah, you know what? And I'll say this, that I think that when it came to accepting in his mind that he wasn't going to play again, and I'm not even sure he's 100% accepted that.
No, he hasn't.
I really like him. I didn't really know him before. We kind of got put together to do this project and had a long talk and decided it would be fun to work together. I really do like him. But I think when he kind of figured, okay, the playing part is not going to happen again for me, and he wanted a career in the media, and I knew he was going to be really good at this because he's just, you know, he's a great talker.
He is. He's great at it. No question.
He's tremendous. And at some point, I think he'll be the lead announcer on NFL games for one of the networks.
Yeah.
But I think he probably felt like, you know, things were starting to go well for him in TV with ESPN and kind of why rock the boat when he didn't really need to. And I understood that. I just wish we had come to that decision before I started working on it. But you know, that's life. I moved on to this project, and it did teach me one thing, though. For anybody who's actually interested in this, that all my 6 books that I've done, they've been my projects where I was in control of the whole thing. I wasn't, I needed to interview people, but I didn't have to check with anybody. Is this how you want to word this, or did I portray this correctly? And I think you've known me forever, Andy. I think I'm pretty trustworthy, and no player has ever come to me and said, you misquoted me or took it out of context. So I think I did a really good job with this book, and I think he liked it. And that wasn't the issue. I just think he felt like, what is he really accomplishing at this point by airing some of this, some of these stories that happened in Washington where he didn't know how people would how accepting they would be of it. And that's fine. I mean, it's his life. I mean, if that's what he felt was best for his life, I'm cool with that. And, that book went away pretty quickly. And, I still have the manuscript in my computer.
Okay. Well, one day I'll bribe you and try and read it. But in the meantime,
no, I've made an agreement with him.
There you go. I know you got ethics. Man of my word. You got. I'm sure. The book is Once a Giant, written by Gary Myers, about the '86 Giants. Not just about that season, but what became of the players. I have read the Bavaro excerpt. I will read the whole book, and I recommend anybody who's you don't even have to be my age, probably 40 and over, and remember that there's some really good stuff in there. So thanks for coming on, Gary. Best of luck with the book.
Well, Andy, I just want to tell people if they're interested, Amazon, any of the bookstores that you like to go to. And the full title is actually Once a Giant, A Story of Victory, Tragedy, and Life After Football, because to me, this is like the most important issue for players of yesterday, today, and even tomorrow, that they really need to give serious thought to what's going to happen when the 30 years out of the game or 20 years out of the game. And I think this book really illustrates some of the concerns that all football players should have.
Very good. Thanks, Gary. Take care.
Take care, Andy. Thanks a lot.
That's Gary Myers. And again, the book is Once a Giant, about that '86 team, which I remember well. And you talk about the heyday of the NFC East. Oh, my God. 1980s. Let's see. Redskins won 83. They went back to the Super Bowl in 84. Giants won in 86. The Redskins won after the 87 season, and then they won again after the 91 season. Giants won in 90, and then the Cowboys took over in 91 and 92. Whew. Man, what a decade that was. Anyway, that's time marches on. More changes, and that could be coming. Thanks to Gary Myers for coming on. He's got a new book out called Once a Giant, about the '86 Giants and what happened to them. Thanks to Rex Minturn for running the show, and thanks to all of you. Listen, Tony will be back in his regular spot here tomorrow, and I will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.